the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
This is AVWeek, episode 164, recorded Friday, October 10th, 2014. Known Unknowns.
Ready.
AVWeek.
Performing scan.
Week.
Online.
This is AVWeek.
And welcome to another edition of AV Week, your source for news and information in the pro AV industry. I'm your host today, George Tucker. Thanks for joining us for this show. Sorry, we're having some technical problems. Thanks for joining us for this show. Today with me to talk about a number of interesting topics I have in no particular order. That is one, Ryan Salazar. He is the editor-in-chief of BroadcastBeat.com. Hey, Ryan, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Also joining us is our good friend at AVNation, John Greene from Advanced AV. John, good to see you again.
Wonderful. Glad to be on board.
Right. And, of course, Holly Head. She is with AV Broadcast Solutions. Thanks for joining us.
Glad to be here.
All right. It's been an interesting week in the news, and I wanted to choose some different topics. As, of course, as you can see, Mr. Tim Albright is not here today, and I get to have fun and play with the stories. The stories I send him that he won't always put on. So, hey.
You did throw some down. You threw some challenges down.
Yes, I did, and I like doing that. And the first one we're going to talk about is Apple TV gets one step closer to becoming your smart home hub. This one's been floating around for a few days, but everyone fears Apple, and they fear that Apple is going to do this or that. John, reading the article, they think that smart TV, the Apple TV, is going to be their gateway. What are your thoughts on that?
I'm afraid to say yes, but I think I'm going to. It's the fear of the unknown that drives a lot of decision making, and that's one. We've been watching, the fear of an Apple TV of any sort coming for the past 2 years, and we think that they've been able to, as any organization, they've been able to sit back for 2 years, and they could jam that thing full of technology and wipe out half of the things that we're doing with different boxes. So that's the fear that we look at it from an AV side. But again, I think that this is where everything is being driven to anyway these days. There will be one central hub. There might be some hidden boxes delivering different services. I don't think there's going to be one ring that fits them all. So.
Well, Holly, let me talk to you about this because, again, Apple has always been at the forefront of this. It's with the Nest, with a number of other smaller players coming into the market, thinking they can take some kind of part of the marketplace. Is it possible that that's really where we're going, even with, say, Crestron introducing Ping and a number of other companies doing similar?
Absolutely. I mean, really, are we surprised? Apple's been dominant in this market since they really created it. I think as an industry, we have to really be aware of the trend that's happening. And for me, this is the first time in my life that I am watching technology come from the home into the workplace. And as AV and broadcast professionals, I think we need to acknowledge it and continue to educate the industry on what's happening, what makes it good, what are some of the potential hazards, what are some of the security as well as quality of service issues that they may have. But it's going to happen. It's an evolve or die.
Yeah, we're seeing the same thing. I mean, on an integration side, most of our business is in unified communication, enterprise-level conversation, but the consumer's ability to do things is coming to the boardroom. It's requested. It's demanded by the people that are using it at home and expecting it at work.
So what about the option that they're really heavily relying on the cloud in this? Now, again, if you haven't read the article yet, for people watching, the beta part of the Apple TV that was released, probably somebody got away with releasing some information about it, but they're really relying heavily on the cloud, the long and oft-debated medium for our industry. Ryan, I'm going to step you in here a little bit.
Sure.
You have experience in broadcast world, but the cloud, as a medium for this, as a gateway.
Well, I mean, the cloud is the cloud is the hot thing, and it's funny. There's a lot of cloud technologies that have been around a long time, and we just gave it a name finally, I think. But the broadcasters are certainly getting nervous about this type of technology, obviously because it's on demand and everything. As far as the cloud goes, yeah, we have to find there has to be some sort of infrastructure. And if you're just referring, are you just referring to Apple, or are you referring to other manufacturers as well?
Well, I think everybody they're pushing for the cloud in all services. Right.
I think it's the word standardize is difficult in broadcast or many industries, but it would be great to have some sort of a technology where all of these systems could use the same type of thing. But the cloud is going to be a difficult implementation.
I'm going to go down a really ugly analogy. This is something that's so you're the moderator, you get to pull back anytime. Literally about, I was in Japan about 14 years ago, and one of the most remarkable things I ever experienced was, they have Toto toilets, Toto self-flushable toilets. The whole concept of, what's changing now is that you're going into a space and there's a certain expectation of what's going to happen in that space. Some of it's going to happen automatically. Let's say if it was, you had mentioned Nest or the Apple. I want to go home. I want my TV to turn on. I want sports to be on. I want to go to my coffee. I want it to be ready, and I want it to know that I want it at 8 o'clock in the morning. The cloud on top of that is just the avenue. I think that everybody gets stumbling upon is that all these boxes have to be up someplace else. The cloud is superfluous, and we're trying to use a word to define something, and so we throw things like cloud at it. Even in our systems, what we're finding is they still want boxes on-prem. They're okay. Walk into a space. I know what I have to do in that space. I know what I want to accomplish in that space, and everything in that space needs to be able to react to it and be able to do its job as well.
Now, Holly, John brings up something really interesting. I'm showing on screen right now another Gizmodo article related to the first one, which is what everyone's getting wrong about home automation. And what I find fascinating about this article was that, first of all, it's one of the first consumer-level mass automation for the home is here that really admits that the iPad iPhone interface doesn't work. Just like John said, I want it to react to me.
Right.
So
I think this brings up several different points, different rabbit holes, if you will, that we could go down. All exciting, in my opinion. First of all, the user interface. I agree with one of the comments, op-ed, if you will, on using iPad interface. I agree. I want things to just work. I want it to be intuitive. I'll tell you, we just upgraded our TVs going over-the-air broadcast. Yes, what's old is new again. And I said, well, we've got to have a smart interface, so should we go with Roku or should we go with Google Chrome? So, of course, since I was shopping, we got both. And I'll tell you what I like about the Roku is I've got a remote. I've got something I can hold. I don't have to go grab my iPhone, iPad, make sure the app is up, make sure I'm on. So I like it being a little bit more intuitive. Now, a second thing that we absolutely have to consider is the cloud. On the cloud, it's there again. It's ubiquitous. It's going to happen. We've got to start working with it. We're spoiled. I know I am. Boy, do I get mad when something doesn't work. When my DVR wants to reboot, boy, I am just hotter than snot, even though I can stream it 10 minutes later from the internet. So having to rely on the cloud for my home automation, yeah, I see several potential boogers in there because I want my information to stay local. If my internet goes down or if I have a storm, I want it to still work. So I think there's some serious considerations there.
Holly, do you think it's a generational thing?
100%.
Okay.
Like having your analog,
if I have the same conversation,
phone line back in the day, you had you had a big storm and the phone line kept running.
Well, right.
I see it from my own teenagers. I mean, what would cause disruption for us is that it's not working, and I got to go figure out what box I've got to kick. They're willing to wait a couple minutes for it to come back.
Sure.
Well, absolutely. I'll tell you a quick story. I live in Florida, going to a birthday for my niece turned 18, and let's say we have an older population in Florida, and the conversation turned to smart devices and all the information that Google's gathering about us. And the aunts and uncles and grandparents started talking about everything that they know about us and how exposed we are. And my niece just looks at me and she goes, Aunt Holly, I can't wait for the day that I just walk into Starbucks and my coffee's right there.
Right.
I don't have to talk to anybody. I can just walk back on out. Absolutely. The digital natives, they expect this. Ryan, you're in broadcast. Look at the quality of service that we're now accepting on broadcast television. You can shoot an iPod video or an iPhone video, and they're putting that up as breaking news.
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah.
I know some 60-year-olds that would have a coronary.
Yeah.
So generationally, it is changing.
John, let me bring this back to you though for a moment. Is this an entry level though for us? We've said we feared the introduction of this. We say we fear that the mass market will come and it will lower the common denominator and make it everybody gets worse, nobody gets special. But I don't know if that's really the truth. Is this actually our gateway to saying, yeah, now you've realized this. Now come back to at least integrating with some of our professional customized stuff so that you get what you want, which is the sports comes on when I want it. I walk in the house and my drink is ready, or whatever that may be.
Well, you know, we're technologists on a Google Hangout talking about technology, and we're throwing down our fears and concerns about something not working, or you know, the resolution is not what we have expected in our earlier days. As this stuff starts to work, and I go back to, unfortunately, my Toto toilet thing, you walk in, it does what it's supposed to do, you do what you're supposed to do, and everything's okay. There's no discussion. Unfortunately, go back to Ryan's comment, there's a standard. You know, so there's a standard that everybody has to agree upon and allow a variation of those standards to occur. So as this stuff starts to happen, again, you know, like if you go into an iBeacon, if you go into a Starbucks, they'll have them hanging over those signs. You will walk by. They will know by the app that you put on your phone who you are. So it's only moments away. The part is what are you going to do when it starts to happen? What's your reaction to it?
And Ryan, let's this is sort of off topic, but let's bring that in since we're talking about the cloud. We're talking about what we want and a sort of revelation by the consumer market that just because I can do it, maybe I shouldn't. Is this also an opportunity for the broadcast side to say, hey, you've had your fun with that, now here's some really quality medium? It may be streaming from Netflix and HBO, but come back to the quality medium, or have we lost it?
Are you saying as in the broadcasters having on-demand or cloud-based services? Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, kind of rewinding back a little bit, you know, the broadcasters are really nervous about, you know, I talk to broadcasters every day, and a lot of them are extremely nervous about cloud-based services and on-demand because obviously they're afraid of broadcasters themselves going away, and I don't think they have anything to worry about. I just think it's another medium. So now there's just more market saturation. But sure, I think they could take advantage of it, and I think they will start to take advantage of it as soon as there's some sort of a, like we said, standardized type system. Because I think there needs to be, you know, you figure in the production industry we had this huge issue, and we still have it, of standardized file formats and frame rates and everything. It's one hell of a big issue when it comes to studios and integrating, you know, sending footage from one studio to the next. In this industry, it's the same type of thing. We have to find some type of standardization, and where all the manufacturers that provide these types of services or service providers have something where we can cross integrate. Otherwise, you're going to have a hard time getting, you know, on demand from your local channel 7 into a certain system and whatever. So.
Holly, let me put one more question to you. We'll finish up this story, though. Ryan mentioned standardization. Is that where we were really headed then? And granted, we all talk to each other. We all have sort of standard protocols. But it almost sounds to me like what we're really looking for now is multiple devices on the same standard.
Well, yeah, we are headed for standardization. If you follow any of the technologies or business throughout the decades, it'll go from new technology, and then it peaks out, and everybody starts copycatting it, and then we start figuring out how to work together. I did a paper at Infocom talking about basic accession was that AV today is where IT was 30 years ago, if you remember the forklift upgrades with the IBM and the DEC systems. So it's coming. I think we'll see a standardization on the physical infrastructure layer, and kind of to Ryan's point with the broadcasters, and it kind of dovetails into the next article that I know we have on deck. It doesn't eliminate the need for experts. If you think about it, it actually raises the level of our specialists. Okay, so we'll have a bunch of generalists out there putting in infrastructures, whether it's my house or my boardroom. But when I really want to do the international video calls, I'm going to bring in an expert. Analogy I like to use is hospitals. We've got clinics all over the place. We've got hospitals. When you run into an emergency room, you kind of don't care who sees you. But once you've been diagnosed, oh, my leg is broken, I'd like to see an orthopedist. So I see our industry evolving into specialists.
Yeah, I'd second that. I think that when you get standardization, the mundane gets done. It gets done quickly and properly, and then there's an area to improve on the experiences. So.
I'm sure it's going to be good for the industry as a whole. I mean, it's going to force everyone to get organized here, finally.
To
work together.
It's an interesting comment to make, that standardization doesn't create mundane, but gives opportunities for better service. I like that. I haven't heard that really expressed in such a succinct way, and I like it. But to Holly's point, let's bring up the next story in our fold, is that Almo is now providing services. Now, Almo is sort of a rep firm. They sell a number of different brands, and now they're selling install services. And this is possibly crossing a line for some, a revelation and a happy dance for others. John, let's start with you. This is a good thing?
It is an absolute positive necessity. Whether we like it or not, Almo is actually a distributor, and they're one of 4 distributors. Almo caters to the Pro AV market, but there are 2 others, ScanSource and Synix, which have been in the IT development that also offer labor services, and Herman's another one. So the need for the distributor to provide services used to be one way. The manufacturers would be, we need you to stock it, we need you to market, we need you to train on the product. But the pull-through wasn't, was held up a little bit. AV integrators, to a large degree, have seasonal businesses, and to date, I've been in this business for 30 years, and I could tell you what certain months of the year I don't want to work because we have just too much work. So finding an outsource, a reliable, trained outsource labor force is the way it's going, and going even to something Holly said earlier, this happened in the IT market so many years ago that it's a tired subject for them. This is new to us. It's a bit of a challenge. It is a bit of a threat, but if we don't adopt to it, you won't be able to grow or support the client's needs. That's my opinion.
And Holly, what do we say to the people, though, who are looking at this as, and I've heard it say online, a Geek Squad model? Is it really unfair?
Yeah, I don't have positive thoughts about Geek Squad, but but I would offer that part of the challenge to a Geek Squad type of technology is the lack of standards. And when I say standards, I'm a big proponent of let's get our physical layer infrastructure. Let's start from the bottom of the OSI model and then work up from there and think about it in both home automation as well as in commercial AV and broadcast. Broadcast is the most standardized, I would say, from a physical layer infrastructure and moving up. So Geek Squad, those poor guys are destined to fail because everything's different. But I'll be honest with you. My first reaction to outsourced labor in the AV market was negative. I'm like, oh my gosh, now all these big companies that have invested in workforces and have invested in internal training, they're really going to be mitigated down to anybody can compete with them. But again, go back to my hospital analogy. Yeah. Does everybody need to have an entire staff of nurses and pharmacists? I agree with John. This is where it's going. We're going to be able to work smarter, work faster, and get a better quality of service. So I do see that as an evolution, and we'll be left with specialists at the integrator side.
Well, I think that's where the resource is. When I would imagine your customers, when they sit down and talk, how well you do, it's not the person that's necessarily hanging a plasma on the wall. It's probably the engineer that sat down and designed this, the workflow and things of that nature. So, keeping it inside and keeping the secret sauce inside is where it's going to be.
Well, I think secret sauce is something that's kind of held us back. Kind of go back to our Gizmodo article on the Apple TV. Once we can agree on how we should communicate from a standards technology, I think then those specialists can really start solving the problems and evolving the technology. Yep. So having a higher layer secret sauce.
Yeah, that kind of sounds like the open source, movement in software where you kind of open everything up and the technology itself grows because of it.
Yes.
Well, this is really nothing new in the broadcast world, right, Ryan? I mean, a lot of these broadcast studios are installed not just by an integrator who helps provide some of the labor, but a lot of times the manufacturer is sending a special team to put that.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I actually manage a post-production facility in Fort Lauderdale, and I'll give you an example. We used an integrator to do some Crestron stuff at our headquarters, and we brought some folks in from one of the large display panel manufacturers, Planar, to put in their systems, and they actually flew their folks in because it was a large video wall, whatever. But yeah, in broadcast, sure, it's the same thing. Even in the motion picture industry, there's a motion picture facility I was going to have some involvement with, and they had like a team of like 20, 30 guys that come in, and they knock up all these racks and get everything all set up, and it's specialized teams of guys. It's pretty commonplace.
Ryan, the other analogy I think that is a safe thing to say is I started actually in the broadcast industry, selling to call letter stations, and the dynamic change that occurred from somebody standing behind a camera to something being automated. That's pretty much what's happening. I mean, you're outsourcing what can be handled by technology in some cases, and it's the producer, the director, the creative talent that's really the magic, and that's what you need to emphasize on. I think that we're probably all saying the same thing in a lot of different ways.
Well, let me ask the question: where does the labor come from? If we're saying that we're having trouble finding the labor, and Almo and others are doing this, where is the labor coming from?
I planted a couple seeds out back. It hasn't grown anybody. So that was my try at it. In the AV industry, the danger of it is that this may sound really silly. It may not be exciting enough for the next millennials to care. I mean, that's part of it. This industry is a little bit of an aging industry, and until we get some exciting things, I don't know if millennials are going to jump in. That's part of the problem. And again, if I could answer that question, I'd say I'd be a richer man. That's all I got to tell you. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it is AV month, and a lot of people are talking about AV month being a way of reaching out to the youth, reaching out to those who may have even a passing interest to come into the field that is wider than just putting home stereos in. I mean, it's AV, it's professional staging, it's broadcast, it's the whole bit. Right. But I still have a hard time finding out where we're going to find that labor when it becomes centralized. It's still a question I have in my heart. Holly, you were about to say something.
Well, I think at least some of it from the Herman or the Almo side, plucking up people from folks who maybe their businesses are closed, whether it was economic influence that closed it or poor business practices. They've picked up a few. So, but finding that next generation, I think definitely is going to be a challenge, and I know something that NSCA and Infocom have both been talking about, which is why we need to keep these sexy technologies coming.
And again, if you're using the model that's setting itself up, as Holly just said, if Almo puts 20 installers in the Philadelphia area and we're snagging up 10 of them, whatever it might be, there's a good possibility that 2 of them will eventually come working for us anyway. Because they see what we do, they like what we do. We've been able to, so that exchange of employees, that growth out of that market is a good potential too. So.
Well, right on the heels of Holly mentioning the super exciting technology, here's one that caught my eye a couple of days ago. Again, Gizmodo, thank you, Gizmodo. How to print a super thin touchscreen display on just about anything. And when they mean anything, they mean anything. So we have seen the vanishing of proprietary touchscreens in a great way with their introduction of the iPhone and especially the iPod and tablets in general. Holly, I'll bring this to you. Is this the next dynamic shift, the next paradigm shift of touchscreens are just made?
This was like one of the coolest, craziest things I've seen in recent weeks. I had no idea this was going on until I got this story. Yeah, I mean, my brain was just running a million miles an hour going, all the things that we could do with this. Just how exciting. And this is where, you know, John, you're talking about, will the millennials be interested enough? Hey, maybe they don't want to pull cable, but man, this is some cool stuff.
Sign me up. That's all I gotta say. Sign me up. I saw the article, and again, there's been articles about digital signage. You know, the wearable clothes and the sign running across the shirt. This fits that application almost immediately. But it's just cool. It's got way too cool of a factor not to be, to get somebody's attention.
Well, now, are we worried that what will happen is that we're going to lose yet another profit center? Or do you, as I think you're saying, this is a complete revolution and we'll make more money? And to that end, let me ask you this open question then. I'll start with John, and I'm going to bring it to the rest of you. Will we see a time when, like the 3D printers, local vendors or local installers will print their own stuff?
Yes. I don't want to make it stretch out much further than that, but the answer is yes. Sure. Because it could be. I mean, it could be. I'm going to go to a concert and I'm going to walk in and I'm going to print my favorite star in a different fashion. He's going to light up during the show. I mean, it's I live near the New Jersey Boardwalk, and you know that what happens down there is insanity. They could sell anything. I could see 20 stores with this application built into it, and changing for the mood of the night or what you're going to do. This is very cool.
Yes, Ryan, in the broadcast world, you guys are getting smaller and smaller. I mean, the digital cameras didn't come very quickly, but when they finally got out into the world, into the OEA, into the electronic news gathering, the outside news gathering, I'm forgetting the terminology for it.
ENG.
ENG, thank you. Wow. I'm trying to see it in my head. I'm like, dang. But this does have some potential for being able to set up real small control surfaces for a live broadcast right where you want to be.
Oh, sure. I mean, there's all sorts of technology that's coming out right now. There are, there's technology that's been around a while, but it's just continually improving, like the backpack broadcasting, whatever. And they have little displays, and I'm sure they could utilize this for a control surface type technology, to do the actual transmission to the station to get it on the air. Yeah. Yeah,
and what I was thinking more about is the ENG now is a suitcase. It's the camera, it's the audio equipment, and sometimes it's one person, if maybe two, at a certain point. But we have a DIY show on this channel, and they talk a lot about 3D printing and about Arduino and Pi and all those other little sort of computer self-programming stuff that you can make wonderful things with. And this seems to be like the next revolution, that little suitcase in broadcast could contain even the touchscreen surface for adding in the information and expanding the image on the fly. And it can be printed from a mini printer that you carry with you if it gets damaged or you need to do something even more.
Oh, yeah, that'd be amazing. That'd be amazing.
Oh, if you tie this to a 3D printer, you could build your jetpack right then and there as you need it.
Yes, the jetpack, the proverbial jetpack. Yes. Well, Holly, let me ask you about this though. We can print it on stuff. This, and John mentions the 3D printers. Now, there are biological 3D printers now where they're making replacement ears, right? And someone made a heart and a liver that they've, I think, put into some test animals, those kind of awkward situations aside. We could actually really revolutionize digital displays, the whole advertising section of this.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And John said, oh, gosh, is this going to take away some jobs, or is this going to change how we're installing? Absolutely. But gosh, just the brain power required to come up with some of this stuff is staggering. I'm having Star Trek flashbacks, and Marcia Brady with her braces picking up radio. I'm thinking, you put this LED and the touch screens and the digital printers, this will kick the Segway's butt.
Right. Yeah. Like you added. Now you called for this. You said a biological printer. So I've got a 3D printer that's building a biological model that has electronics. So I shape it like an ear. I have a new ear. And I have the ability to listen. I have the ability to, conditional situations. If it was, we could go on for the next 20 minutes and throw out a bunch of good ideas.
Well, yeah, but it does revolutionize almost everything for that. I mean, again, the 3D guys are making such strides, and they're starting to become, and a lot of them come from the AV world. The DIY show that we do is a lot of AV guys who are makers, and who really want to apply this stuff. We also have a show called Pico Perspectives, a Pico projection show, and they are hot to trot for this kind of stuff, so that they can be able to print not just a screen, but something that's interactive. And then the mind boggles from there. There you go. You get your interactive that doesn't need to be on a cloud. It doesn't need to be anything other than a localized controller, what we've always done, right? Hey, finally they've come back around, and there we go. It's probably a few years off, but yes, the whole body modification thing is out there. And have you actually side one? There's a guy who actually started putting magnets and chips in his fingers, and he's becoming the first cyborg, in his words. And he's able to control things in his house with the magnets and the chips in his fingers.
Wow!
Boy, that takes the iPhone out of the home automation challenge. There you go.
Yeah, exactly. Can we please have it out of the home automation? I mean, I like my iPhone, but that's just something I don't know. All right, well, let's as I have a little bit of technical problem, let's get to a story about LTE. All right. This is hackers vowing to kill Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and everything else. Now, if you know what LTE is, it is long-term evolution, it's called, and it is a technical sort of cellular data system. This one's from the Register over in our fine friend, in which these guys are basically claiming that they can take over everything. Now, we discussed earlier about one standard, and we lost Ryan somehow. He'll be back. Just as I wanted to ask him something. We about one standard, but this one's claiming that it can take over Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. John, those are really well-established technologies, right? They are really being used everywhere.
It's funny when I read the article, my reaction was, "It ain't broke, why fix it?" And this is an area that I guess there's somebody else trying to, be a global solution for everything, but there's just machine to machine, or the way that we're interfacing in a small range, it's working perfectly fine. I don't know why we're trying to solve that problem. That was kind of my take on the article.
Well, I mean, there's always room for improvement, I guess. There's always room for a new. Well, if we limit it to one standard, we're never going to advance past that, right?
Right.
But that being said, would we be interested in going to one standard like that then? That's really the major question.
I think Americans have proven that they won't, and the rest of the world has proven they don't want to do what America does. So no,
right.
We all have a better mousetrap,
Yeah. Well, I mean, and LTE is here. It's here as WiMAX. They tried to put that into, like, say, Philadelphia and some of the East Coast cities, and maybe I think in Los Angeles at one point. They attempted to bring in WiMAX, which is a form of the 3G/4G system. But my concern here is, what about it's prone to disaster? If we have one sort of cellular network, even though they say they can tag on all this stuff, use it for what we do.
I go back to what Holly said. I think that there's a need for, if it were to allow itself to be at a higher level, in other words, a backup to everything, then I guess it has a value. I think if any standard comes in and says we're going to replace everything that exists, I think you have always that champion issue. Yeah, the underdog. I want another choice. I want chocolate, not vanilla. But again, it would be adopted after it was fully proven. Go back to that concept. I think that if they try to spoon feed the technology and, hey, try it out, you're going to have too many failures on a regular basis. So I've seen too many manufacturers say, yes, we're the only ones that really know how to do this. A couple of them are not around anymore.
Well, and let's get real. By the time something's truly vetted and all the bugs are worked out, we're on to the next technology. It's almost impossible.
Yeah, I really agree with you, Holly.
Now, I had a vision for the 4G and the WiMAX when I first heard about it, because what I wanted was, I have my mobile device, I take mass transit a lot, I'm watching the hockey game, and when I get into the house, WiMAX, in its essence and LTE, is saying that I can go from entering my house with this. The TV and the remote and the system in my house will pick up that I'm watching it, will turn it to that channel, turn it on, and it will be there for me. So I can watch seamlessly, end to end, what I wanted to watch without it disturbing me, and I can go from small screen to large screen without any real issue.
I think that's awesome. But they said the same thing about cell phones in the early 90s, remember? You were going to bring your cell phone in, and then all of a sudden you were going to transfer to the landline because we were all worried about roaming fees. And I know a couple technologies got there, but really, did we ever see it materialize?
Well, why didn't we see it materialize? That's the big question. Do we have any thoughts?
I'm still waiting for it.
Here I'm hoping that you guys are going to save me, and I can have that. I want it. I watch so little TV, but I watch my Rangers, and when I'm traveling, I want to be able to go from point to point and not have to worry.
Again, I kind of like the way it's going, and this may sound relatively simple. Is this the one solution is not going to be the way? I think that, like what you just described, you went from 3G to LTE, or then you go to Bluetooth because you're going to print from your phone. As long as all those networks are talking to each other, it should be transparent. And if there's a really good solution for a local machine to machine, stay with it. We're good to go. The technology needs to be created to solve a problem. That's where it wins.
Well, and I think we go back to a central point in our discussion. There would have to be some standardization between the different formats and how they're talking to one another to really get that seamless integration. And for better or for worse, I just don't see that happening. Not with the rapid pace of technology advancement.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of, as John did, about a purpose-built technology, here's one that's being used that's using a purpose-built technology for something completely different. Again, our friends at the BBC bent over the pond, heating buildings using computers. And this gentleman here installs big server systems and was wondering what he could do with all of the excess heat. He's developed, if you can see from the page, if I can get over to it, there we go, radiator systems using the computer server systems to heat the home or heat the office. This is sort of a green thought, and with the rise of Realcomm and Infocom doing an environmental building or total environment show within and outside of Infocom's regular trade shows, this is the stuff that people are starting to look for to control not just their costs of heating and cooling, but reusing the building's own operating systems to bring those prices down. Holly, I'll start with you. Do you think this is something that would be feasible in either the commercial or the residential world?
I would say definitely in the commercial world, sure, with building heating. Now, as a Floridian, that's a little, it's not going to have as high a premium here, but I can certainly see where in the commercial building space that this would be fantastic. Yeah. As long as it's cost effective and reusing what we're already making is great. That's outside of grounding and bonding. I know that's the #1 concern in data centers is how you handle that heat.
Yeah, I would agree on the commercial side. I'm not quite sure on the residential side, other than it being a cute novelty and something to talk about, to the party guests that you brought to your house, that you have it. I'm not sure that I have enough servers to heat my house. But on a commercial side, and besides, we started this conversation out, everything's going to be in the cloud anyway, right? So wherever that is, we got to keep. But going back to on the commercial side, we are starting to see conversations a little bit more active in regards to this area. The green concept has been talked about for probably 5 years, but we're starting to see a shift in conversations occur. This is a perfectly good idea.
But here, and again, so the environmental thing. So this is I hate to use the phrase, thinking outside the box about how we do what we do. Now we have, if you're doing a professional home automation or media server system, right, those things give off heat as well.
Yep.
Is that not feasible to then say, I don't know if LEED will allow this usage, but is that not a feasible idea to say, why can we not use what we're producing, our waste, to our benefit? and help green AV. I mean, this is a big debate that was on the AV Shop Talk podcast a couple of days ago about not just everything from the components, trying to find those to be green. Because as one of the guests, Anthony Zotti, pointed out, if you knew half the stuff that's in there and how toxic some of it is, it's a little frightening. It's very daunting to think of how many CRT TVs are sitting in a dump somewhere.
Half of them are in my garage.
That's where they all went.
I don't disagree, George. But I think that other than a novelty in the consumer, I guess home theater is a big deal, and I know that there's servers out there. But for the mass, they probably have a TV and a DVD player, and then it's all coming off of a cable box. If there has been an investment in that type of technology, including home automation, I would agree that you should take advantage of that thought process and take the stack off and bring the heat back into the house. There's no doubt about it. I think that we see it much stronger if we do enterprise unified communication, and there's 25 rooms all with that type of heat being generated. Yeah, to find a way to bring it together and feed it back in and reuse. Yes, it should absolutely positively be considered.
You know what this is reminding me of in the early days, the solar cell, solar power conversations, and I'm sure it still goes on today. They look at the efficiency of the solar cell, but moreover, the fly in the ointment, so to speak, is how do we capture that energy so that we can use it later? And again, I didn't research beyond the article, but I'd be curious, that heat that we're producing, great, but what if we're producing it in July and we're in Philadelphia? Who cares, right? So how do we capture that? How do we store that? How do we turn it into something that we can use on demand or use for something else or use immediately? The immediate use makes sense, but until I move to Alaska, I don't see it would have to be harnessed.
Right. I had a sudden thought, too, and I'll keep you on this, Holly, for a minute, and I'll ask you, John, to comment on it. Yes, with the heat in Florida or in Philadelphia in the middle of August, could we not use that heat to cause some kind of internal condensation within a compressing unit that turn that heat into cool, using that energy to spin something? I don't know. It's just a wild idea. If you think about the buildings in New York that have, there's a couple of very fancy buildings in New York that are reusing their own heat to do just that, and they're using the old... I forget what they're called in some of the deserts in the Middle East. They use these
swamp
cooling
heaters.
Towers.
Right. Huh? Swamp heaters.
Yeah, where they are.
Florida has. Yeah, I mean it's reusing it to some degree. That's I the cost benefit ratio is probably not there though. That's the other issue. It's it's nice to have. It's something to talk about. It's showing a concern for an issue that needs to be addressed. But I bet you the cost ratio in this stuff is really not there, like Holly said.
Well, it's a dream. We can hope, and all the environmental types, we can keep hoping.
Yeah.
On to something a little more fun, though, that actually uses up some energy, I suppose, is an article about the Kinect from Engadget. One of our friends at Engadget. Kinect for Windows can track individual finger movements. Now, this is something we probably didn't know it couldn't do, but... It now, because the camera couldn't do it, but now they're using the depth sensor to be able to find and trace individual digits, which is a remarkable thing. So my question to everybody about this is, what do we think we could use this for? and what do you think, would be the next step? It's a $150 peripheral, so it could go in right now. Holly?
The first thing that came to mind when I read this article was how awesome it would just marry up with our home automation systems. We've talked a lot about having to go over to your iPhone or your iPad and pull up an app on your Droid. Wow, what if I had this Kinetics and I'm just walking in and kind of like on Minority Report and I'm just telling it to turn this on or point at that, kind of like you see in the TV controls. I think they're already using that. That was the first thing that came to my mind.
And if you look on screen right now, you can see that they're showing it moving virtual objects in space. And my first thought was maybe for medical stuff, remote surgery, training. And I've been infamous on this show and this network for saying I am not a gesture and refusing that gesture controls will work. I've even gone so far as to say if you implement them, you have to train your homeowner on semaphore, with the flags, in order to figure out how to control something without turning off the radio but turning on the TV. But could we practically train and utilize this with our clients? John, would this actually be usable for them?
My only concern, my reaction to it was, unfortunately, was even shallower and like, what do you use it for? How come? Why do you need it? I guess my understanding, so I thought about it for about 15 minutes and said, okay, in the spirit of what we've been talking about, if I had a Kinect outside my front door, I walked up and I waved hello to my house and it recognized me and then it started to do its little task inside the home automation, wow, thank God it only cost $150. That's, I guess, it's another GUI interface. It's another interface to technology. I'm okay with pressing a button. So I hope they build it for the next generation. I think the next generation would probably look at it and say, yeah, that's cool. That's a good way to do it and get used to it. And if it's done, we don't have to train the next generation. They just do it.
Well, that actually lies a bigger question, doesn't it? We say that the millennials and the next generation don't need to be trained. They just do it. But they don't always understand why they're doing it or what to do when it doesn't work. Well,
they don't want to. They don't need to. That's when we go back to the earlier conversation. Holly and I are like, oh, my God, if this thing fails, I got to go find a box to kick. They just move on. Their attention span's 140 characters.
Well, yeah. I don't know, but if they're on Instagram, it's more visual. I mean, I don't know.
Okay, there you go. Okay. So it's a picture in 140 characters.
Is that Fahrenheit 451? I don't know. But
I think there's something to be said for creating intuitive technology. Come on, yes. Apple did it. I mean, yes. when I can hand my 70-year-old mom a iPhone, and after a couple of silly questions, she's using it and off to the races. And I've seen this time and time again with infants, and it's an intuitive technology. So do we really want them asking that why, or do we want them creating new programming and getting really creative with what this can do, and just like we've kicked around, how could we use this technology? I think we've got a lot of fun stuff to come. And George, hand gestures do work if you've ever trained a dog, but my mother disagrees. She would rather have him jumping all over the place. So I can teach a dog hand gestures, but not everyone in my family.
Right. So, and I'm well aware of hand gestures. I live in Manhattan for a number of years. Hand gestures are just fine.
They communicate quite a bit.
Yes.
All right, and to keep that jovial sense, we're going to go into one last story today, and this is one harkens back to 1878. This is not a sci-fi movie, but the panic and despair in the New York Times, of all things, over the moral panics. New York Times warns people about the evils of Thomas Edison's aerophone. And this is from our friends at Tech Dirt. They come up with the strangest and oddest stuff. John, this goes back to what we were talking about. You said some of the older folks, some of the gray hairs like us, who may or may not desperately fear the new technology. So we talked about, Google, my privacy. But people are afraid of Google. They're afraid of the GoPro cams. Are we just repeating it, and how do we stop it?
Again, as I'd mentioned to you earlier, my blog was centered around this. Is that, change is a horrifying thing, especially when it comes to technology. I'm as you well know, I'm all over social media, and I've got a staff of 100 people, and of 100 people, there are about 4 of us who use Twitter, and I sit there and I try to explain, what that is and how to do it and what and why and what's the benefit of it. You could read these words right out of their mouth and just replace everything where it says aerophone with Twitter. Any of the technology. We had a full-blown sales meeting yesterday that was around the cloud. What of our clients are asking us. What we're doing today is changing, and the only thing I can guarantee you in all the years I've been in business is it's just changing faster. So the ability you can't stop it. That's the fun part of this all, is that you got to catch onto the technology, the wave of which you're going to ride to the beach. That's my opinion on this.
Holly, is it really just a factor of educating the consumer and the public about what the technology really is, as opposed to the innate fears?
Yes, definitely education. I'm a huge huge proponent of education. But to John's point, technology is changing so quickly. You don't feel like you can get caught up with it, and it's already lapped you once. You don't know what you don't know. So I think one of the things that's come out in the AV world, these collaboration, the whole theme around collaboration and collaborative workspaces, I think is really going to be key in educating on new technologies, because I don't want to say impossible, but I believe it's virtually impossible to know everything. And education can alleviate a lot of fears and a lot of familiarity, for sure.
Yeah, I think that the technology does have to be, again, I guess simplified, it is friendlier. The ability to intuitively walk up and know what the thing's going to do is really helpful. Going into a space and you know what that space is for. Again, if it's a collaborative space, that's one of those things. There's a box that's going to allow collaboration. We had a conversation just yesterday about that exact model. We represent a fair amount of manufacturers, and we have 5 different collaboration boxes. And the term was, collaborative space and talk, and we brought all those demo pieces to all of our customers to go, yeah. And then they decide, we're okay. We're good talking to each other. We're good at sharing it this way, and it doesn't need to be additional boxes. So some of the technology, you're solving a problem that doesn't exist, perceived to exist, but it really doesn't exist. So that's, there's a lot changing. And it's changing for people that have been doing it the same way for a long time, and we all have to adapt. So other than reading that and actually finding the real humor in it, because it's humorous. The best is, the official use of hemp. That was the best line of them all,
Yeah, I caught that. And if those who haven't read it yet, you suggest that Edison has invented too many things. They're too irksome and troublesome and too confusing for the modern world, and that the proper use of hemp with Mr. Edison would be the best bet.
I will be using that. Keep an eye on a Twitter reel for that.
You can use that as you wish. It's pretty serious. Well, guys, we've run out of time, and I want to thank you guys for a really fun conversation, despite some early technical issues, but thank you very much. Joining us today, and unfortunately having to leave us, was Ryan Salazar. He is founder, editor-in-chief, and post-production broadcast engineer, and with broadcastbeats.com. Check him out. Some great stuff there. Also joining us is our good friend John Greene from Advanced AV. John, thank you so much, and tell folks where they can read and hear more from you.
Again, www.advancedav.com is our website, and I can be found at jgreene6. That's John, Greene 6 on Twitter.
Cool. And, of course, Holly, thank you so much, Holly. You are with Acu-Tech, and you are an AV and broadcast solutions expert or salesperson, right? I said that wrong at the beginning. I apologize. I read it right off your lower thirds and cheated.
Well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, great conversation. Thank you so much. All right. Well, this has been AV Week on AVNation. Please join us here every week for AV Week. You can also find on our website, avnation.tv, this and a host of other AVNation type shows, from Pico Projection to live events and a whole host more. Thank you for watching, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon.